So, guys, welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. So, last week, Maz and I were on an episode about Kobe. And one of the things that we particularly focused on was women's sports. And we particularly talked about, like, that relationship between Kobe and Gianna and what you could take away from Kobe's life and legacy, right? Especially as a father. And just the man that he was post-basketball, right? I know you made a lot of great points about, like, his emphasis post-basketball was still basketball, but it was on women's basketball and growing that, especially because he wanted a better life for his daughters. Right. So today's episode naturally is a follow-up to that conversation. It's a bit of a layup with how easy it was to talk about the stigma surrounding women's sports and why people like Kobe Bryant even have to go out of their way to promote something like this. So today I'm here with Amina, Maz, and I'm also here with our guest for today, Lena. Lena, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. My name's Lena. I'm currently a sophomore at Yale University where I play field hockey. And I went to MCC for a couple years, and then I went to high school at Lake Forest Academy.
Yeah, so Lena has played 2 years. Are you guys D1?
Yep.
Cool, so 2 years of D1 field hockey. We just wanted to have her on today just because I think even in we're going to talk a lot about, like, the professional ranks of sports. But even in the college ranks, like, I feel like there could be a lot of discrepancy. Lena, like, when you go to games, like, is there a big attendance difference between, like, the games that, you play in or, like, the games that you see, like, your male peers play in?
There are definitely some sports that are more popular, like the stereotypical football, basketball, which are generally more male-dominated. So
yeah, I think you bring a dope perspective. Just being an athlete right now and being in your shoes, I think you bring a dope perspective where it's like, well, why does any type of discrepancy exist, especially in professional sports, right? College is one thing, but in professional sports, like, these are athletes that are at a really high level, and, like, what causes that type of discrepancy? So Maz and Amina, I actually want to start with you guys, right? Mm-hmm. There's a classic joke, and it exists primarily between guys, and it asks, would you rather have your local WNBA team win a championship, or would you rather have $5? And a lot of guys typically side with the fact that they would rather have $5, and I think that's very telling for obvious reasons. But, like, how do y'all feel about that? Well, first, do you even know who our professional basketball team is?
Chicago Sky.
Chicago Sky.
Yes. Dope.
I saw one game when I was a kid, and that was like a privilege of mine that I got to see that.
Yeah.
But
Cool. So how do you guys feel about the and Lena, I'm gonna work my way back to you, but, like, how do you guys feel about the whole $5 a title thing? Maz, I'm gonna let you start, and then I'll work around.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I can't even say, like, that I've never heard that, because I have. And, like, that's the sad part about it. I feel like I've heard it even when I was in middle school. I feel like I've heard that joke. And I don't know, it's crazy, because it's like I feel like the women's sports in general kind of has made, like, a lot of progression, right? From, like, when they started, like, I feel like even, like, just based off, like, revenue and stuff. But I don't know, it's just like that joke is still a thing, and it's like, it's just so sad, because it's like, it's the reality is that majority of the guys are going to say that just because it's like, to them, like, they would never watch women's sports. And, it's just like, it's not like society doesn't even watch really women's sports, right? Unfortunately. But it's just, I don't know. It's just, I guess that's just like the norm, I guess, for us, but it shouldn't be.
Mina.
So obviously when I first heard this, I didn't hear this joke or
week.
Whatever until, no, actually I heard you guys mentioned it a couple weeks ago, and it's bugged me ever since, because I wouldn't consider myself, like, passionate about sports. The deepest I go is I watch the Olympics every year, and I get really into it. But I don't know, it's really frustrating. But I mean, I personally see why men aren't interested. They don't care, and there's not really anything in it for them. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised by that joke.
Yeah, Lena, any takeaways?
I guess just that I feel like women's sports aren't publicized as much, so that has a huge, that impacts it a lot. And then other than that, it's kind of frustrating, but at the same, like, I guess people don't watch it because they don't grow up watching it. So it's like you have to go out of your way to seek out women's sports, where men's sports are just on all the time. It's the norm. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think public, like just marketing in general is definitely a big thing. And obviously, like, Maz, I think from the business side of it, you could talk about the fact that it's based off budgets and revenue.
Yep.
But I think it's definitely there, right? And I think one thing that we can all agree on, especially just being Chicago born and raised, is even when you don't care for a team, you still kind of want the best for them, right? Like, think about in 2016, all the Cubs fans that didn't exist in like October of 16, but all of a sudden in November of 16, we've got a ticker
Shut
tape
up.
parade and we've got so many people showing up, right?
I was born
Ditching
a Cubs fan, by the
school.
way.
The thing.
Yeah, dude. Like people, like I was. So you were a senior, right? You were a
Yeah.
senior in high school. Did you ditch that day?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely ditched that.
I don't know how
I
old you
I
two
was
were,
in
but-
college, and I didn't ditch, but my school was pretty far away. But I do remember I was at a school in Central Illinois, and apparently Bloomington, Illinois, is really Cubs leaning. So my whole like school, everybody was coming out after they won the final game, and people had on like the towels and
Yeah,
the
the
blankets
red
and flags and everything like that. And I actually have a really funny video of me and my friend screaming at the TV in the final game, which I might share with Unfiltered if I can bleep out the curse words. But so no, it was a really exciting time for me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Lena,
Yeah.
I feel like you would have been a junior, sophomore,
I don't remember exactly what year.
sophomore 4 years ago.
2016.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you were you there? Like, did you care for the Cubs?
I'm not a huge Cubs fan. I'm more, I don't know. I was born in Wisconsin, so most of my
Oh.
teams are, back there. But I guess.
Fair enough.
Yeah, at my high school though, there was like major repercussions if we did skip that day. They like made it known, but still a lot of people skipped. I personally didn't, but it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think that's a huge flaw in the $5 championship argument, right? Like even if you don't care for the team, at the end of the day, those are some really hardworking athletes that have won. They put the effort in to win something like that. So I think it says a lot. But like between the two of us, I think it's super hypocritical for us to say it means a lot. Because when was the last time you watched a WNBA game?
I don't know. To be honest, honestly, I think this summer when they had that bubble,
Can you name
I
me two
did-
players in the WNBA? Make it three.
Tamika Catchings, Elena
Yeah.
Deladon,
Okay.
Candace Parker if she's still playing.
I don't think she's still playing.
No,
I think
she's
she's
not. I'll
retired.
give you more. Brittany Griner.
Brittany Griner's still
I
playing.
love Brittany Griner. That's three, right? She's the best.
I mean,
honestly.
yeah.
She's
You had
a-
Sabrina. You had Sabrina in
Sabrina
high school last
Sabrina,
week.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
Yo, honestly,
cool.
guys, what do you think this is, bro?
I don't
you're
know.
woke. I'm woke. All right. Come on now.
I was looking at a one, maybe two. But yeah, even like for us, right? Like we're up
Yeah.
here talking. I feel like it's so hypocritical because we're preaching. You should be watching whatever, but then we don't go out and do it. And I mean, I've definitely seen like a game or two, but I think that's
mean-
because like the amount of Chicago basketball you can watch without Comcast
Yeah.
Sportsnet is significantly reduced.
Yep.
So
And
I think
that's
that plays a part.
that's a huge part of it. Like we
Yeah.
know that, like the fact that it's not televised as much, like there's not much like. But the thing is, then it comes to like, am I gonna like stream a WNBA game?
No.
Or we're streaming it,
No.
right? Exactly. So
Oh.
I guess
But I
another
don't know,
thing
it's-
is like there's a huge like social aspect to men's sports. Not necessarily if you're interested in the sport, but a lot of people go like so many. What you were saying about Cubs fans when they won.
Yeah.
So many people who didn't follow it just went to the parade and stuff for the social aspect and like the partying aspect, not even to celebrate the team. So.
Yeah. Dude, I think the sad thing though is it's like when you were at West, what was Jewel? Was she?
Jewel was a senior my freshman year of high school, and she was. Oh, we're talking about Jewel Lloyd.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I don't know if you know
And-
any other Jewels.
No, I don't. And I actually did get to spend a lot of time with her. And she was, I don't know, she was just the talk of the school.
Yeah.
And then we all knew what college she was going to. And then it wasn't a surprise when a couple of years later, probably around my senior year, when she got drafted. signed. I
number
don't know.
one
Number one.
overall,
Number
and
one to
that
Seattle.
that is a problem. The fact that we don't like, no one talks about that as much, like that's insane.
No, it depends.
I
where you're
followed
from.
it at the
No, but
time.
regardless, that is insane.
Yeah, because-
Number one overall pick in the highest
From
level
Link-
of
from
basketball.
Lincolnwood. From
Yeah,
Lincolnwood.
someone from our area, like that's insane. That is insane. Like,
I did go to her games when she was still at West, and
Yeah.
it was seeing her play was definitely like
Dude,
it was amazing.
on that note though, right? Watching her play, like I remember when I was a senior, so Jewel Lloyd started like just stopping by West. I think she'd been freshly drafted at this point, but she had spare time between season to just come and coach. So she would
That's
coach,
so cool.
and all the guys were eager because they were like, "Damn, I'm trying to bust Jewel Lloyd."
yeah.
Never happened, right? Like she was so good that you were not gonna beat her.
Yeah,
And I think that tells a lot, right? First, you think you can beat them. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect.
teenage boys
You wouldn't
at high
expect
school
Anthony
level.
Edwards to walk into a court in the
Right.
first pick and be like, "Yo, I can bust Anthony Edwards." Like that's not gonna happen. Like you'd
Nah.
respect him, right?
Exactly.
But that's cool. It's whatever. As an athlete, that's like a challenge that you're putting up, so it's cool.
Right.
But I think it says a lot because even though you see Jewel, right, even at her games, she's the number one like player. You know, she went to Notre Dame, whatever. I can guarantee that her crowds weren't as big as like when you were a junior, I was a senior, right? Like we had Jalen Brunson. Like when Brunson played at West in the playoffs, like the crowd just, like it was filled. Right? When we did like showcases and Tyler Eulis was in town, like it was filled. So even from a high school level, like you see the stigma that even if you are really, really good at your sport, you don't show up. I don't know. Was that like, have you seen that, Lena, with any, did you go to school with any prominent athletes? Like, have you seen them get like public exposure?
I guess the biggest name that came out of my high school was Alex DeBrincat, who plays for the Chicago Blackhawks. We've definitely had great female athletes, but he definitely went the furthest, I guess. So whenever he comes by, it's always a huge deal, and everyone's trying to meet him. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's anything crazy necessarily.
I want to shift gears slightly because I think this might hold true. And I feel like there might be judgment on other parts. But there's actually a professional football league for women, right? So there are a lot of women that play football. But, you know, in the extent of high school, it's like powder puff, which I feel like even in the name, like you probably nitpick an issue with the name.
Don't get me started.
But for the professional football league for women, it's called the Lingerie Football League, right? Like they recently changed their name. But like the whole, it's football, but it's marketed off like a different appeal, right? The appeal is not sports. But that's one of the sports that I feel like has a good viewership for very obvious reasons. Like I feel like that's a big stigma of women, right? Like it's not talent. So how do you guys feel about that? I feel like there's so many professional athletes that you kind of delegate them down to like how they look, especially for women. Like if you think about Alex Morgan, like Alex Morgan is a dope player for this, you know, the national team. But I feel like for a lot of guys, like, yo, Alex Morgan is so pretty. How do you guys feel about that, especially as females, not even just as athletes?
Well, I guess like with the whole football league, I feel like a lot of women who play in it might not be okay with it, but they do what they have to. They kind of like give in and do what they have to just so they can do what they love and play sports. So like a lot of the times women can't do exactly what they want or be respected for what they expect to be respected for. They have to give in to other stereotypes just to like receive what they deserve, I guess. So that kind of sucks, but
I didn't know that was what the league was called.
It had a name change to the Legends Football League.
Legends. Okay.
That makes
See,
it better
because
for you.
no, yes, but no. That's so frustrating. That's all I can say. That's like appropriate for this channel. But no, that's really frustrating.
That
You got anything?
No, that is insane. It sucks that like, you know, they can't, you know, like I feel like there's so many, like even if you see like little leagues, right? Well, where like there's a lot of like the little boy leagues like for football and stuff, and like you'll see like some of the girls, like some girls will like join this league and they're like the best, right? Like some like you'll see these videos on like Sports Center, House of Highlights or whatever, right? And like you're seeing like
Got
the
this
girl
little
just
girl making
take
some
off,
shit
right? Like
moves.
just literally.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's annoying that like, you know, there can't be a normal regulated league, you know, for that. Like that's just
Yeah, there was a little league baseball team based in Chicago, and their pitcher was, I think it was co-ed, and their pitcher was this young girl, and I hate that I forgot her name. I know her last name was Williams, though, because it's my last name. But she was on the news, like, all year that year, and they were talking about how she was going really far. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't softball, because I know when we talk about, like, female athletes, they only think they can only play softball, but she was a baseball player. And I don't know, I thought that was really cool because she was so young, and, like, I just worry that her potential is probably not really, like, that people probably didn't foster that potential because she was a girl, and, like, she could only go so far. Yeah.
Is it toughness, would you say? Like, would you say the reason why there's not regulated
Toughness.
girl league, like, is there not, is it, like, toughness, right? Like, is
Like
that,
just straight girls? Or are
yeah,
you talking like
just
co-ed?
straight girls.
Dude, I feel like for football especially, there's not just a regulated female league because guys wouldn't watch. If you think about like NFL viewership.
No, it's not even about watching.
No, I think at the end of the day,
like,
everything is a business. And if you don't
Yeah.
have viewership and you can't bring in the revenue, then think about like the
But then-
XFL, right? Like they just went out of business.
Yeah.
Think about like all the football leagues that have opened outside the NFL, like they go out of business. And if you think about NFL viewership, right? Like I could bet you it's a majority guys. I don't have the right numbers on.
No, but I'm not even talking about like, you know, professional league, right? I'm talking about even just like
little league.
little leagues. Like, why does no one like? Is that the reason? Like, oh, because girls aren't tough enough to have a organized football league.
I don't know
as
how
like
you-
is that why they have to do co-ed? Why can't they just do
Just
Probably
girls?
because there's not enough like demand for it because women aren't told like they can do it, so no,
Yeah.
they aren't in it.
Yeah.
So then they have to resort to these lingerie leagues when they get older
Yeah.
because that's the only option, right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that like I don't see like do you guys see what I'm
I don't
trying to say?
think
Like,
there's another
it's
feasible
problematic, right?
option. Yeah, of course it's problematic. But I also think that growing up, like, I don't know about you guys, right? Like, football is an option for guys. I feel like there's probably a stereotype that football isn't a sport that girls can play, right?
Yeah.
When you were young and you were picking out sports to play, like, what were your top picks?
Well, I had so I have an older brother, so I'd kind of do whatever he did. So like I'd play football with his friends, even like tackle football and stuff like that. Nothing serious, but we would do that all the time. I played baseball growing up, and every time I bring that up, everyone's like, baseball or softball? I'm like, no, baseball. So I guess just I played men's hockey growing up, not women's hockey, but a lot of that is just like everyone's so shocked and surprised, and I mean, I guess I'm used to it, so it doesn't frustrate me as much, but like I feel like I should be more annoyed with it than I am.
Dude, I think that's the stigma, right? There's a stigma that there are certain sports girls can play, and if you, like, you know, this episode is particularly focused on, like, once you get to professional leagues, like, what's with the discrepancy, but even, like, you're saying right now, right, like, growing up, like, you're kind of pigeonholed into certain sports, and there's certain things that if you do play, and people are like, oh, you kind of raise an eyebrow, like, oh, you sure? Like, was that it?
Yeah.
Mean anything?
Well, two things. So Lena and I both went to MCC. And when I was a student, I played volleyball for 2 years. And it was kind of this unspoken understanding at MCC that basketball was a boys' sport and volleyball was a girls' sport. And I had a lot of friends who were actually very gifted at both basketball and volleyball, but we didn't have a girls' basketball team. Granted, this is when MCC was a lot smaller. This is before that big MCC Academy expansion. But then I got to high school, and I actually got to like search for my passion, and I found out that was long distance running. So I was able to like go out for the track team. But I did know kids and girls in high school. I knew one girl, I forgot her name. I'm so sorry. But she was a football player and a wrestler, and she played on the boys football team and the boys wrestling team. And I'm not sure how she managed to make that work, but I just remember seeing her, you know, the boys in their uniforms and everything, and there she was, her own uniform and everything. And I was like, that's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
But like going to public school, I was able to, like, the playing field was a little more even because I was actually able to go out for the sport that I wanted to go out for and that I was passionate about. But I mean, yeah. No.
All right. I'm going to change gears off the marketing of certain women's leagues. I've got two more prominent examples of like women who've kind of been shot down in their respective sports. So one is Sarah Fuller. She's made national headlines a couple weeks ago. So she's a soccer player at Vanderbilt. The team got a bunch of COVID cases, so they needed a kicker, right? And naturally, she's the goalkeeper, so the coach said, all right, yo, like, Sarah, can you play for us this weekend? So she played 2 games, and one of them, like, Vanderbilt sucks at football this season, and they got absolutely, like, demolished, right? It was horrible. And towards the end of the game, she kicked a squib kick, which is essentially, like, you're trying to keep the ball low on the ground so no one returns it, because you're already getting blown out. You don't want to get blown out more. And when it happened, people were like, damn, look at that. Like, that's why you don't have a girl on a male's football team. Like, she can't kick. Like, bro, y'all should have signed me. I could have done that. And the other example is the assistant head coach for the San Antonio Spurs, right? So Maz, like, the head coach for the Spurs is Popovich, right? Super talented, well-known, huge advocate. He's a huge advocate of women's rights. So his assistant head coach is Becky Hammond. She played in the WNBA. A couple weeks back, Popovich got ejected from a game. So Hammond, being the assistant head coach, had to coach. And, bro, like, the amount of hate I saw, they were like, yeah, you know, even for a girl to get this opportunity, like, a guy had to let her in. Just a bunch of, like, hate, right? And it's different because it's from the outside, and I think that also perpetuates the stigma a lot. But do you have comments on those 2 cases? Those are definitely 2 cases. I think there's some parts of understanding that why, like, the NBA and WNBA are different is very apparent. But I think those are situations in which you talk about, like, well, did that have to happen? Did you have to say that?
I feel like a lot of the time people are commenting on stuff they don't know enough about just because, like, something catches their eye. Like, they saw, oh, the female kicker didn't do exactly what she was supposed to, but they don't know the whole story of how she got put in that place. Yeah. So I guess they just, like, a lot of people make negative comments without knowing everything.
And I feel like you probably have experience with that, right? Like when coach tells you to do one thing, you do it, and maybe like someone stands like, damn, like why did you do that? But it's like, well, you weren't in the huddle, like you didn't know what coach said.
Yeah, if you don't know what's going on the bench, what the team is talking about, what the game plan is, you can't really comment too much on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about Sarah Fuller, and I remember seeing comments. Oh gosh, must have been. Yeah, I'm a little old. It was on Facebook actually, and it was a bunch of like hate comments, and it was like multiple hate comments from predominantly. No, it was all men. And I remember sending it to the group of the podcast group, and they were like, "Yeah, maybe we should talk about this." And like I didn't know a lot about Sarah Fuller before, but like seeing that she was trying to hold her own, even though she was put in like a not so great situation, I really felt for her, because it wasn't really anything that she had done aside from just being a woman. And then I do hear about the what's the
Becky Hammon.
Becky Hammon.
I actually do. I've heard about her a lot. But I'm not surprised.
The Becky Hammon one was interesting. I mean, we like immediately after all the hate, like, you know, came out. I know Greg Popovich like backed her up right away, right? He was like,
Bunch of NBA players.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, but specifically like, you know, the backup from the guy that they're saying that like, oh, they're just because, you know, the guy had to give her like,
Hall of Fame head coach.
Hall of Fame head coach, right? Exactly. So, you know, he came up straight up, told her like, you know, she's in this position because she earned this position, right? She's not in this position because we're here to break a record that, oh, she's the first assistant woman coach. Like that's not it, right? So I think that was definitely a good thing for him to do that, right? And on top of that, it's like if you think about it, like even within the NBA, right? It's not even just Becky Hammon. There's women refs, right, for the first time in like ever, right?
People throw
so, like,
shade.
Yeah, exactly. People throw shade. Like, people when you're watching the game, you're like, oh wow, like, what this girl, like wow, like a man could have made a better call than that. Like it's like that stuff will always come, and like that's the problem, right? Like that is like no matter like how much like, you know, how progressive we get with it, right? It's like it's always gonna be an issue, and it's just like it's something that I don't know how we're gonna have to like you know get across. Hopefully it's, you know, something that's, you know, with time, you know, it's gonna get better. But like again, it's just like men, dude.
At the end of the day,
Can't trust
men,
them.
they don't, regardless of how qualified they are, men don't respect women. Like Serena Williams, for example, is considered the best athlete in the world right now. And
At her sport.
No, I've heard best athlete in the world.
At
like,
her
period.
sport. At her sport.
Anyways, but let's see, that's my problem.
I think that can be debated, but
okay,
I'm not going to
but,
debate.
At her sport, I put my
but
foot
my
down.
point
At her
is
sport, she's
that
the best.
there were a lot
Yeah.
of people that didn't want to give her that recognition or that respect because she
Sure.
was a woman. For example, she was, oh God, I don't remember what game it was, but it was last summer. It was either last summer or the summer before last, where she broke a tennis racket. And if you watch men's tennis, at least one man breaks a racket like per set. So like it's not a normal, like an abnormal thing. But she literally was, penalized for that. And it wasn't something that was abnormal or anything, but she was coined like as an angry black woman. And so it's just the idea that she doesn't get any respect as a woman and she doesn't get any respect as a black athlete. And like that's how it is at the end of the day to be a female athlete, is that you don't get the respect even if you are qualified and like you have the experience. It's like you're a woman, so it doesn't really matter. And so that's kind of like, I don't know, that's kind of what we have to face going into that.
I can't comment on the whole tennis thing. I don't watch enough. Maz, I don't know if you watch enough tennis to comment on that, so I'm not gonna. comment here.
The debate on who's the best.
No.
Oh, talking about that. Oh.
There's
Just
no
the
debate on
racket
who's the
rule.
best.
Just the racket rule. So I think like definitely having a Debbie Downer conversation right now. So I want to switch it to something more cheerful, but I think there are certain stigmas that are pushed that aren't validated per se. Lena, I feel like you might disagree, but like there's definitely the argument, right? Like should WNBA players be paid the same as NBA players? I mean, like personally, I think that's a no, but I don't think it's a no because they're not as good. I think it's a no because from strictly like a revenue sense, like you can't allocate like that. But then there's arguments where it should be like a yes, right? Like the women's national team for soccer and the men's national team for soccer, right? Like one has more success in revenue and they're not paid as much. But can we I just want to clear stigmas before we go into like, well, how can we fix them, right? Like I don't think would you guys argue that if they're at the same level that like certain players are better than the other? You know, like would you argue that like a men's basketball player is worse than a WNBA player?
I don't understand the question.
I mean, the sports are just played not differently. Like, obviously the rules are the same and all that. But, like, I guess when it comes down to the level of play, there's definitely differences. Not at all because someone's worse or better just because of how men athletes and female athletes are built.
Yeah.
But I agree with the whole women, like, not necessarily should be paid the same amount, but at the same time, like, the percentage of revenue should be similar. They shouldn't be, like, cheated off their paycheck or, they should have some kind of, like, stable pay. They shouldn't have to be, like, scraping for money.
Yeah.
I take Brittany Griner over Cristiano Felicio on the Bulls, 100%. That's
Bro, did you you know the reason I said the whole comparison thing? I don't know if you remember, but Brittany Griner's rookie year, somewhere around there, right? During like the 2012 Olympics, it had to be the 2012 Olympics. She went up to DeMarcus Cousins. She's like, I bet I could beat Boogie in a game of 1-on-1.
No way.
Like, and like that's something where it's like, I don't think that's plausible.
Like, you don't think she's able to beat him?
You think DeMarcus Cousins?
I mean, like, no, right? Okay, yeah, but like, so it's like it's the same.
But
thing,
I don't
like,
think it's laughable. I think that's like an athlete's perspective. Like, of course you're gonna, dude. If I walked onto a court right now, I'd still be like, yo, yeah, I could beat so and so. Like, that's the athlete's perspective. But I think one thing that comes from that is not the, DeMarcus Cousins is better than Brittany Griner. It's the fact that you get males in the comments that are like, bro, what is she talking about? Like, the only thing she's better at is looking like a man. Like, like then you'll get like really targeted conversations where it's like you're gonna attack her appearance and be like, oh well, she has an Adam's apple. Like maybe she could be a male basketballer. Maybe she could beat him, right? So I think there's so many stigmas. Like, instead of like saying like, oh yeah, like I understand, like an athlete, like Lena, I'm sure anytime you get on the field, like you want to win. Like, like you don't play a sport for fun when you get to a certain level. Like, you're playing it because you want to win. And then again, I think it comes down to people don't know what they're talking about and they say stuff like that.
Also, like, with that, it's like if like exactly what you said, people just speak to speak, and like if like a man said that, everyone would be like, haha, nice joke. But like if a woman said it, it's like she really thinks like, is talking down about her. But I feel like as a minority in anything, so like women in sports or whatever, you always have to be above average to even like compete, I guess, on a respect level. Because if you're just average, then it's like, okay, so what?
Yeah.
But like if you're above average, it's like, okay, she can actually do something. It's not even like, oh wow, she's amazing. It's like, okay.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, man, you see it all the time. I saw a TikTok the other day from some girl, like it might have been like Minnesota or something. She's like the Minnesota State Player of the Year, right, for a female, and her brother's like a sophomore on varsity, and they put a 1-on-1 together, and they're like, write in the comments who you think is gonna win. Everyone's like, the guy. Well, no duh, the guy. It's like, bro, that's the State Player of the Year. Like, yo, she's probably decent. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I think that also perpetuates it. But let's shift gears, right? Now that we've defined what stigmas are fine, what aren't fine, what can we do going forward? Maz, I know one thing we were talking about is like there have been a ton of professional athletes, right? I know we're focusing straight on the WNBA, but that's because that's probably one of the most prominent leagues, right? Like tennis is an individual game. So I don't think you can perpetuate like a league and you can't push that, but like WNBA is an entire league and you can definitely push the status of that league. And we've definitely seen in like the last couple of years, like there's been a lot more support from professional athletes, right? Like whether it be Kyrie donating a part of his paycheck to fund certain WNBA players, athletes, or like LeBron coming out and statement supports. What can we do on like an individual level, right? Like you're not gonna have like the same reach that LeBron James does, but what can you do to not push the stigma, right? Because one day, like Maz, like if you and I have a daughter, right, like I'd want her to feel like, yo, like I can play basketball, like I can be good at it. I feel like some of these stigmas push out an idea that like you can't be. How do you like any takes on that? Like what can we do going forward?
That's a really loaded question. I'm not gonna lie,
it's pretty
but
big.
I think that it starts with like fostering girls' potential from a young age, because like for all the Jewel Lloyds out there, there are people that might have flown under the radar because like they weren't given enough attention or they weren't given the same opportunities. And so I think that if we just take them as seriously as we take like male athletes at that same age, then that's a good start, because at the end of the day it's like it comes down to like respect, and I just like they're not really respected, and they're like even Jewel Lloyd, who was literally the best of the best, when she visits the high school, those boys literally think that they could take a professional basketball player. Like they don't respect her. And
you got a lot of competitive nature though.
Huh?
I don't know if it's in that aspect. I don't know if it's respect or competitive nature.
I mean, competitive nature, but at the same time, she's a professional, and
okay, I still want to go toe to toe with her.
I'm not saying no. Like we play her, but they're like, oh, I could beat her, and it was like no competition, or like it wouldn't be hard or something like that. And not because she's a bad player or she's a so-so player, it's because she's a girl. And I don't
know about that.
No, and I know that's me. Obviously, I wasn't there by the time this happened because she was still a student when I was in high school. But like,
I think just being an athlete, you think you can beat anyone. Like,
I mean,
because if you ever have the mindset that you can't, then you're stepping in like you're playing a game against yourself and the other guy.
When I was an athlete, there were some things that I could do that other girls my age that weren't athletes could not do. Like I was able to do pull-ups and push-ups, and I was pretty strong. And other people couldn't do that. And so, and I worked really hard for it too. So it's like,
I think it's more like the respect that they had for her rather than like them, like their comments, like whether they think, oh, it's not going to be a challenge. Because like when a guy says like, I could beat him, for example, it's all talk. It's like, yeah, I want to go one-on-one with them, but
just
it's not.
Testosterone just coming out right there.
It's not like you still have respect for the guy's an athlete. Where I feel like the comments you were saying are more like, oh, it's a girl, it's nothing.
Exactly.
So like the comments could be the same, but their intentions very different.
Yeah, I can see based on that.
And I guess like with your previous question about what we can do, I feel like it's like a cycle kind of where women, when they're growing up, aren't really going into athletics because it's like they don't see representation of themselves, but like there's not representation because there's not really a demand for it. So it's like somewhere it has to start. Yeah.
That was gonna be my take.
Yeah,
I was gonna say you gotta realize basketball is still basketball. At the end of the day, no matter who's wearing the jersey, who's got the number on the name of the back, like you're still putting the ball in the net, right? You're still kicking the ball in the goal, like whatever you're doing. At the end of the day, dude, like I know definitely, I've got guys that'll watch like high school basketball over like WNBA, and it's not, the game isn't worse, right? It depends. If you're gonna watch a game because you want to see someone thoroughly dominant, you want to see dunks and all these like electric plays, but if you're watching because you love like the fundamental nature of basketball, right? Like you love seeing like the ball swing around, plays being set, teammates setting each other up, then there's nothing wrong with the quality of play. If the reason you're watching basketball is because you're just casual and you're like, damn, I want to see LeBron dunk, then yeah, you're never gonna watch it. But if you're like, damn, like I want to watch something right now, and you don't mind watching an actual game of basketball, then you could feel like you could agree, like the NBA's been watered down since you got like super teams and certain guys can just dominate, right? You can't. There's definitely female players that are better than others, but in terms of that, I feel like WNBA is purely like the way basketball is meant to be played, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. When it comes to like what we can do, right? I would say like, as us, becoming future parents, inshallah, right? Like when we have sons and daughters that might want to play a specific sport, like to not limit, like to treat them the same way in the aspect where it's like you're not thinking like let's say both of them are on the same talent level, right? Like don't be saying like, oh, you know what, like don't put in the girl's mind, right? Like your daughter's mind that like, oh, you know what, you like don't make this a career because of what is going to be the outcome, right? Like we can't think that way because that's just like that we're being a part of the problem, right? By just doing something like that, right? So I don't know. I think that's something that's really small, and again, like might not even apply to any of us, but like if we know people that have that potential. Like they see, like we have someone like that we're friends with, and they have kids that have this potential or whatever it is, and they're holding back, like, oh, you know what? No, I'm gonna put them, through school instead. I want them to focus on it. But it's like if this is their passion, if this is what they're good at, then let them do it, right? Because it's like that at the end of the day is like what they enjoy doing, and like again, money aside, like this could be like something that they can be doing, right, for the rest of their life. So
Lena, so you are where you are, right? And I know you mentioned earlier, like growing up with your brother, like him being older, you would play all the sports. Like, what was the parental encouragement like? Like, did your parents actively encourage you to play sports? Was it like, Obey did it, so you were like, yo, I'm gonna follow suit, and then you liked it, or was there always like from a natural age, like, hey, you can do whatever you want to do?
I guess like as a family, we're just always very competitive, and I would play sports with my brother, like. No one would go easy on me. It was always like pushing everyone around, my dad, my brother, my mom would jump in. And I guess a huge thing is I grew up in like my first few years in London, and there it's like a lot more normal, I guess. Definitely when I moved here, I felt like, I don't know, like the girls around me weren't really into sports as much. So in the community, I definitely felt like I was the odd one out. Like, everyone kind of not looked at me differently, but like, what's she doing with her life, I guess. Where everyone else would focus on other stuff, it was like, oh, she's playing sports. And I just remember when I broke my wrist, for example, I got a few comments like, oh, is she finally done playing sports now? And I was like, no, it's going to heal and I'm going to jump right back in. Like, just that kind of stuff of not being the norm.
Yeah.
But my family's always been very supportive of sports, pushed it a lot, and
Yeah, I think you're definitely a good story of like what you can do in the future, because it sounds like like no one ever took it easy on you, right? So you always had that competitive nature built in, and two, like you weren't then like because you played like with your brother or just as a family, like, you were never afraid to play. So I
Go
feel like
girl.
that's-
Girl power.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's huge. I feel like that's if there was a takeaway from this episode, it's that, right? If you're gonna try and reduce the stigma, then start in your own household, because it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what a professional athlete does. If you think about, we were talking about Sabrina Ionescu last week.
Yeah.
Like people showed her respect right away, but they showed her respect because Kobe Bryant was mentoring her. They didn't show her respect because she was putting up triple doubles at Oregon, like it was, a guarantee. So yeah, Lena, thank you for being on.
yeah.
I'm hoping people can learn from your story. I think it's definitely beneficial that if you could tell your little boy that you can play sports, you definitely tell your little girl she can play sports. I think that'll go a long way to realizing that there might be a difference in like skill, but it's still fundamentally the same game. In terms of entertainment value, you're not missing out on much.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you guys for being on today. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you.